Honorable Senators, I rise today in a delayed celebration of Earth Day here in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq people, to speak in response to the speech from the throne. In her September 23, 2020 speech, the Governor General said, "Canadians know climate change threatens our health, way of life, and planet. They want climate action now, and that is what the government will continue to deliver. The government will immediately bring forward a plan to exceed Canada's 2030 climate goal and will legislate Canada's goal of net zero emissions by 2050. Colleagues, that Governor General, Julie Payette, was an astronaut. In the 2019 throne speech, she said, "And we share the same planet. We know that we're inextricably bound to the same space-time continuum and on board the same planetary spaceship." Colleagues, while many of us have been captivated by the recent landing of the Mars rover Perseverance and the flight of the helicopter Ingenuity, as we search for environments beyond our own which can support life, let's today turn our attention to our own planet and the theme of this year's Earth Day, which is Restore Our Earth. Restoring our Earth so it can continue to support life will require both human ingenuity and collective perseverance. Did you know that the first Earth Day was started in 1970 by an American senator, Gaylord Nelson, a Democrat, and Pete McCloskey, the Republican congressman he recruited to be his co-chair? The theme of the original Earth Day was a question of survival, and its message, as highlighted by CBS's Walter Cronkite, was act or die. Gosh, they sounded a lot like Greta Thunberg back then. On Earth Day this year, U.S. President Joe Biden hosted a virtual global summit to discuss action on climate emergency, and it looks as though the act or die mantra of the original Earth Day has been revived. More on that later. Honorable colleagues, on June 17, 2019, the House of Commons passed a motion to declare a national climate emergency in Canada. Since then, we had a federal election in which the environment and climate change were clear priorities for Canadians. Last February, I launched a Senate inquiry into finding the right pathways for Canada to meet our net zero carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions targets. Senators Mitchell, Galvez, and Pate each spoke on the inquiry, and many other Senate colleagues were lined up to follow. The idea was to spark our own Senate conversation on climate change solutions and then ignite interest and action across Canada. Like many of our best laid plans for 2020, the inquiry was hijacked by the pandemic and then died with prorogation. Colleagues, today I would like to join the chorus line of other pivoters and pick up the climate conversation where we left off last March and invite you to join me to advance it further. Today, I will reference speeches from the throne, highlight what Canada has promised, touch on the US and other international players, speak to pathways toward net zero, and conclude with a modest proposal for you, my fellow senators, so please do stay tuned until the end. In October 1970, just months after the first Earth Day, Governor General Roland Michener introduced Pierre Trudeau government's plans in the speech from the throne. And I quote, "All of our efforts for a stable prosperity and for humane community will be of little value to us if we do not quickly and determinedly grapple with the threat to our well-being and the well-being of future generations of Canadians, which is represented by environmental pollution. Pollution is a many-headed hydra and requires action in many forms. You will be asked to consider bills intended to deal with pollution in the ocean and in the atmosphere. There will be proposed the establishment of a department to be concerned with the environment." On October 2nd, 1986, Governor General Jean Sauvé spoke on the Brian Mulroney government's plans. "My government recognizes fully the essential relationship between a healthy environment and the quality of Canadian life. A new Environmental Protection Act will be introduced." On September 30th, 2002, Governor General Adrienne Clarkson delivered the Jean Chrétien government's message. On a global scale, the problem of climate change is creating a new health and environmental risk and threatens to become the defining challenge for generations to come. On October 16, 2007, Governor General Michaëlle Jean articulated the Stephen Harper government's commitment. Climate change is a global issue and requires a global solution. Our government believes strongly that an effective global approach to greenhouse gas emissions must have binding targets that apply to all major emitters, including Canada. On December 5, 2019, Governor General Julie Payette highlighted the Justin Trudeau government's priority. Canada's children and grandchildren will judge this generation by its action or inaction on the defining challenge of the time, climate change. 1 year later, the Canadian government introduced its plan entitled A Healthy Environment and a Healthy Economy. The plan aims to create over 1 million jobs and includes $15 million in investments over and above the Canada Infrastructure Bank's $6 billion for clean infrastructure. Central to the effort is placing an escalating price on carbon pollution. The federal government's constitutional right to do this was recently affirmed by the Supreme Court decision, which noted that, and I quote, global warming causes harm beyond provincial boundaries, and that is a matter of national concern under the Peace, Order, and Good Government Clause of the Constitution. Chief Justice Richard Wagner described climate change as a threat of the highest order to the country, and indeed the world, that will cause significant environmental, economic, and human harm nationally and internationally, with especially high impacts in the Canadian Arctic, in coastal regions, and on Indigenous peoples. Budget 2021, introduced April 19th by Canada's first female finance minister, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, provides $17.6 billion towards a green recovery to create jobs, build a clean economy, and to fight and protect against climate change. The government introduced Bill C-12, the Climate Accountability Act, more than 5 months ago, and recently introduced Bill C-28, which would enshrine the right to a healthy environment in Canada and strengthen the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. Canada has promised a variety of 2030 targets on the road to meeting our net zero by 2050 Paris Agreement commitment. The original target was to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels. The recent budget promised 36%, and at the US-convened Earth Day Summit, Canada promised to meet a target of between 40 and 45% reduction by 2030. Having rejoined the Paris Agreement, US President Biden committed to a target of 50 to 52% emissions reduction, very significant for the world's second largest emitter. China's surprise announcement last year at the UN General Assembly that it would cut emissions to net zero by 2060 is notable, given China is the most polluting nation on Earth, responsible for 28% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Also at the summit, the UK committed to 68% reduction by 2035, and the European Union to 55% below 1990 levels by 2030. Honorable Senators, with the US, China, the UK, and climate-determined Europe all expressing ambitious net zero targets, Canada has clear opportunities for collaboration and a significant competitive innovation and business imperative to add to our drive for a healthy, climate-stable world. Colleagues with the World Meteorological Organization confirming that the global average temperature in 2020 was already 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and the past 6 years the warmest on record, with Arctic sea ice receding, sea levels rising, epic wildfires, flooding, and tropical storms all on the increase. Our planet and its inhabitants are at a tipping point. It's time to decide what we turn towards, and time to decide, frankly, what we put behind us. It's time for smart and humane choices. We'll be asked to declare our choices in Glasgow this November, and the Canadian electorate may be asked to vote on those choices in the near future. Jason Dion, lead author of the Canadian Institute for Climate Choice's recent study, which outlines 60 scenarios for Canada to get to net zero, said, Canada has a strong hand with our landmass and resources, our infrastructure and know-how, but we have to play our hand wisely. Our advantage relies on action, so we can't simply sit on our cards and wait. Let's remember, Canada has never met any of its targets. Honourable colleagues, to meet our ambitious new 2030 target and to get to net zero by 2050, we clearly need to accelerate carbon pricing, while at the same time finding other ways to rapidly reduce and stop our emissions. At the top of our list has to be a quest for a secure, reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy supply, with innovation in the production, distribution, and utilization of green energy as our first priority. This includes hydro, wind, solar, geothermal, and tidal power. We know we also need to examine low carbon energy options, such as green hydrogen and possibly small modular nuclear reactors. We need to decide how quickly we can and must phase out fossil fuels. We need to reduce and eliminate carbon from our transport sector, from our buildings, from our manufacturing, and from agriculture. Powerfully effective nature-based solutions to carbon storage and sequestration are an obvious choice for Canada, and with our abundant forests, grasslands, wetlands, coastal marshes, and agricultural land. Carbon capture and storage technologies will no doubt play a role in getting us to net zero. Emerging from the COVID pandemic, we are facing need to reconcile two once-in-a-century imperatives. One, accelerating our response to the climate emergency with the associated imperative of a just transformation. And two, the need to rebuild our post-pandemic economy. Both required focused attention on the well-being and the potential of our citizens, of women, youth, Indigenous people, oil and gas sector workers, and other groups severely affected, while being mindful of equity across Canada's regions. No one and no region should be left behind. Honourable colleagues, that is a tall order, and one which will require bold leadership and all hands on deck. It will take an all-of-society approach, and that means a role for us too. Canadian senators stepping up with our Senate independence and free of the constraints of short-term electoral cycles. Imagine what we could do with our combined grey matter, diversity of experience, power, and influence. We have high-quality studies, inquiries, question period opportunities, motions. Most importantly, we scrutinize and, where necessary, work to improve or initiate legislation. And today, I would like to propose a new way we as senators could lead in climate action. This is what I'm about to tell you about. Colleagues, last month I had a call from Baroness Helene Hayman, former Lord Speaker, and Baroness Bryony Worthington, lead author of the UK Climate Change Act. They had learned about our net zero inquiry and wanted to discuss potential collaboration between our chambers. They're co-founders of Peers for the Planet, the UK House of Lords group, launched last year with 120 members. Both felt there was more parliamentarians could do to tackle climate change, and they recognized the unique potential to work across and practical changes in policies and laws, regardless of which party's in government. Their collaborative big tent approach has yielded concrete results in a number of areas. Honourable colleagues, I am impressed with the momentum and results Peers for the Planet have been able to build, and I'm proposing to you today that we start our own similar Red Chamber group focused on Canada's pressing climate change response. 51 years after the first Earth Day initiated by American Senator Gaylord Nelson, and a year after UK Baronesses Hayman and Worthington launched Peers for the Planet, I am keen to work with you to formulate our own uniquely constituted and mandated Senate of Canada Coalition for Urgent Climate Action. Just imagine what we could do if we marshal our collective ingenuity and combine it with our unfaltering perseverance. Honourable colleagues, if not us, who? If not now, when? Let's do it. Who's in? Thank you.